Well, it'll be interesting. I'll share.
There we go.
Okay. So, and what I'll do is I'll share my screen here. Okay. Oh, brother. So, welcome, attendees. We are launching our 25th EPAC. Sorry, I'm trying to check the chats. Okay, here I go again. Welcome, everybody. My name is Robert Cherney, a former president and now a director of the Ethics Practitioners Association of Canada. Very pleased to have you joining us to join in a discussion with Dr. Mary Gentile about giving voice to values, which Mary has been developing and promoting for several decades now, and which is gaining a lot of usage around the world. And this will be a wonderful opportunity to update ourselves on it, those of us who are already familiar with it, or be introduced to us, and introduced for those who don't know it yet. This is the 25th EPAC webinar. I'm hosting with Craig Irvin, our president, and you probably all know these things by now, but using a phone line or the computer audio, raising your hand if you want to request speaking privilege, or writing messages in the question box. And you can send those at any time. Please use the question box rather than the chat, although sometimes I'm not sure which one of them is operating. This is being recorded and it will be on our website in the future. And as you intervene, either spoken or speaking or in writing, think of the degree of privacy that you want to protect and exercise discretion. If you don't want your name or your company or organization's name used, then by all means, do not say them. Si vous voulez intervenir en français, allez-y et je vais traduire au fur et à mesure. So you already probably know about our association, which promotes networking and educational opportunities like this webinar to link people in Canada and elsewhere who are interested in organizational ethics, because our vision of the world is one where people in organizations are ethically aware and act ethically. Please do become a member if you are not already a member. And now I'm going to invite Craig Irvin to talk about our relationship with Indigenous peoples in Canada with a land acknowledgement.
Right, thank you, Robert. So welcome everyone, and very pleased, of course, to have Mary with us once again. It's great to have you present this material for giving voice to values. I think it's so valuable in so many different ways, and I look forward to our discussion and our analysis of the case study that you shared with us today. So I will remind everybody that it is indeed National Indigenous Peoples Day, so the land acknowledgement has that much more resonance on June 21st, also the first day of summer. So we will begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on this virtual platform, it is important for each of us located somewhere in Canada to recognize the difficult history of these lands. We therefore affirm our commitment and responsibility towards improving relationships with and deepening our understanding of Indigenous peoples and their cultures locally and throughout Canada. From coast to coast to coast, we are grateful to live on the ancestral territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples. Please join in a moment of reflection to consider past harms and mistakes and how we can each do our part to support truth and reconciliation through ethical awareness and ethical practice. Thank you, everyone. And back to you, Robert.
Thank you, Craig. So very briefly, Dr. Gentile, Mary, has a worldwide following as a researcher in organizational ethics, beginning with some studies at Harvard, I believe, in the business school, and then founded this movement called Giving Voice to Values to achieve empowerment in practical ethics situations. I would add that Mary's extremely generous with her time and with her resources. I'm not aware of what sort of mansion she lives in, but she has been very, very kind with doing several webinars and a workshop for us free of charge, and also making her materials available to us for your use as well, free of charge. She's been associated with several universities over her career, and most recently with the University of Virginia, the Darden School of Business. And so heartfelt thanks to you, Mary, and over to you. I believe you will not be sharing your screen. You'll simply be talking. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and people can see you better this way.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Craig. It's really great to be speaking to EPAC members again. I have very fond memories of times in such conversations in the past, and also our conversations, Bob. So, so this is great from my point of view. I think the plan is I'm going to give I'm going to give a brief sort of reminder of what GVV is and a little bit of what we've been doing more recently, so people will know, what's happening. I think you might have some questions you wanted to share, Bob, and then we have a case that we can talk about. So I think that's the agenda, and we've got about an hour. So in terms of the brief overview, I suspect some of you are already familiar with GVV if you've attended conversations I've had with you all in the past, but quickly what it is, it's an innovative approach to values-driven leadership development. And it grew out of my frustration with the way that we would teach in business schools and train in companies around ethical practice. And we tended to approach it as if it was entirely a cognitive issue. So we would give people rules and codes of conduct and behavioral guidelines, and we would have, ethics and compliance officers to monitor behavior, do inspections or investigations when necessary, and so on. And of course, those are necessary. But those were focused on building awareness so people will recognize issues when they see them, and teaching them a kind of analysis. What are the guidelines? What are the bright lines? So that people could look at situations and analyze whether they were over the line or not. So that's important. But what I was learning, both from my own experience in teaching and training and consulting, and also from a lot of research that was emerging, this was about maybe a dozen years ago when I first started with GVV, there's more now. What I was learning is that actually that approach, that cognitive approach, was insufficient. And that a lot of times what people would do when they encountered values conflicts in the workplace is that we would react emotionally, automatically, even unconsciously, and rationalize after the fact, post hoc, about why it was the right thing to do, or maybe why it was the only thing we could do. This kind of called ethical intuitionism. It's this idea that we respond in the way that we believe is possible. And so I actually was recognizing, both from the research, and if you're curious, I can answer some questions about the research if you're interested. There was research from psychology and from neurosciences, etc., that was suggesting that a more effective approach would be to focus on building action, and building literally, I call it a moral muscle memory, but it's basically building an ethical habit. And that the way you do this is actually by giving people a chance to rehearse, to pre-script, to practice, and to peer coach, and to do it with their peers, the very people that they may need to be having these conversations with, so that you when you do encounter these issues, you've literally rewired that automatic response, so that now you don't just react emotionally and on what you think is possible. You actually have more ideas of what's possible. And so that's what the pedagogy and the training methodology was based on. And if you're curious, I can talk to you more about how we do that. But the core element of it is something I call the GVV thought experiment, where instead of having a traditional case study where people are given difficult situation and ask, what would you do? Because that will just trigger that same automatic response I talked about. Instead, we have a protagonist who's already decided what they believe is right. And what we ask you all to discuss is, how could they get that done effectively? So you don't have to commit to ethical action until you've actually practiced and identified ways that you think it might be possible to act ethically. So that's kind of the core idea behind it. I thought I would just maybe quickly share a little bit about what's been happening more recently with GVV before we go to the case study and Bob's questions. But when I started this, as I said, about a dozen years ago, the idea was I wanted to transform the way we teach about ethics in MBA programs, graduate business programs. It's actually grown well beyond that now. It's literally been shared on all 7 continents, including the Antarctic, and it is being used in many business schools, both graduate as well as undergraduate and exec ed. But we also started to be approached by businesses. And so it's now been used in quite a few different industries and businesses around the world. We've also shared it with the US military, with the Australian police force. We've shared it with government, state government and municipal employees. So for example, we work with the GFOA here in the US, which is the Government Financial Officers Association. And we work with another organization here in the US that brings together not just financial, but all sorts of government employees. We've started working with law schools. We've shared it with law practitioners. We started working in healthcare with both nursing and physicians. And most recently, we've gotten some funding to develop a whole suite of GVV style, I call it GVV, Giving Voice to Values, GVV style scenarios and materials based on tech ethics, because there's so many issues around artificial intelligence and around surveillance and privacy and cybersecurity and bias and those kinds of things. So it's actually been used in a lot of different ways that we hadn't originally intended. We've worked with the Aspen Institute in the US to apply it to sustainability and DEI type issues. So it's grown, as I say, beyond its original roots. And if there are some of you who have questions about how it might apply in your different worlds, we can talk about in the questions. So I'll pause there. I was trying to give a very quick sort of overview because I know Bob has a few questions, and then we can move to the cases if you like.
Well, actually, we don't necessarily have to treat these now, but I'll mention them quickly. I was curious how the GVV theory may have changed over the time that you've been involved with this, and also how the response to GVV may have changed among those who lead organizations, but also among those the rank and file. And I just had one thought, without talking about Enron and those scandals 20 years ago, but more recently the Me Too movement. The very idea of people speaking up has somehow become more publicly discussed. So I just thought if you wanted to make a bit of a remark about the landscape you're looking at now versus when you were having your first insights from your research.
Right, great. I'll do that. And then if you want, we can go into more depth later. But to begin with, I guess, there have been a couple big changes or developments, I guess would say. It's not just about voice, but one of the things that I've started doing when I work, especially with organizations, is focusing on actually also when you're speaking to more senior people, how do you hear it when people raise these issues to you, and how do you respond when they raise these issues with you? And so we use the same methodology of rehearsing and pre-scripting and peer coaching, but we give people an opportunity to develop the muscle for responding to these things in a way that is not doesn't immediately shut it down, which helps you to stay open to it, etc. And again, if you like, if there's later, I can share some examples of that. We had some really interesting experiences working with Unilever in Nigeria, where we worked specifically on that issue of the conversation across levels. In terms of response, when I first started sharing this with companies, senior leadership would want me to just tell them what I was doing, but they didn't really think it was relevant for them. It was for their middle employees and lower level employees, because they figured they wouldn't have gotten to be senior level if they didn't know how to speak up. But what was interesting as time went on, it became more and more clear that we actually do need to involve. I mean, I always thought we did, but they started to realize that they needed to be involved in these conversations. But you had to frame it a little differently, mainly to appeal to egos. But, we would talk about, if you're at a senior level, you still need to think about, well, how do I voice these values to my senior peers in a way that I can still maintain a working and collegial relationship with them when I think that they're going off in a direction that's not appropriate. And as I said before, how do I hear it when someone raises it with me? And also, how do I create a culture that makes this kind of activity more easily received? I have some stories about sharing it with senior partners at McKinsey, if you're interested with that. In terms of your question about about the Me Too movement and how we're in a different kind of political environment and all of that. What's interesting is it's less the influence of Me Too. I would say that what I'm encountering more, I just did a program in Africa last week, what I'm experiencing more, both in the US and elsewhere, is people talking about how we're living in a time right now where people are speaking up, but not necessarily very effectively or very constructively. And so when I was talking, for example, to a group of Pan-Africa educators last week, they were saying, well, in the US right now, it seems like everybody's, speaking up, they're yelling at each other, and is this giving voice to values? And, one of the things that I try and talk about is that from the beginning, giving voice to values was not simply about speaking up. It was about figuring out, that in a way it differs from sort of speak up culture kind of approaches. It was really more about trying to figure out, how do I express these things in a way that actually will maintain a conversation and will actually be able to be heard by the person that I'm trying to influence. And so, in other words, there was a lot more, and our strategy and our techniques for doing that, I think, are hopefully helpful for living in a more divisive and sometimes more combative kind of context as we are right now, at least in the US. And I know other parts of the world as well, from my experience. So that's been interesting. In fact, you'll probably see that in the case we're about to discuss, that some people, especially post Me Too, because this was written pre-Me Too, will look at this and wonder why she didn't do some things earlier on than she did. And I'm not arguing that she shouldn't have, but I'm simply saying, there are different ways to do this, and you want to think about both what you're able to do. One of the pillars of giving voice to values is playing to your own strengths, and also look at the context you're operating in. Try and think about, how am I going to be most effective? So, but we'll be able to talk about that in the case. So I'll pause there. Do you want me to move to the case, Bob, or did you want to ask some more questions now?
No, I really have nothing intelligent to say at this point. Sorry about that.
Somehow I doubt that, but
please do go ahead into the case.
Okay. So folks, I believe that Bob has shared the case with you, but just in the interest of making sure that we all remember, and in case you don't have it right in front of you, I'm going to share the little setups and give you a chance to respond to them. And then I'll tell you what happened, and then we'll move on to the different, I guess there's like 4 different segments. To set this up, let me explain that actually this case was written quite a number of years ago when I was first developing Giving Voice to Values. And someone had told me the story, told me, you really need to talk to this woman. These are disguised, of course, but you really need to talk to this woman. She was at a major, I think it was a Fortune 200 company. She was a senior VP for strategy, and she has a story about standing up to the chairman of the board. As you will remember, that's the last of the sequence of the segments that I shared with you. And so I approached her, introduced myself, told her what I was doing, and said, can I interview you to develop a case? And she said to me, yes, I will tell you that story, but first I want to tell you several other stories about experiences I had earlier in my career, because in her view, she was only able to act effectively in the last instance because she built a kind of moral muscle, and she built a set of skills, and she started to understand better how she was most effective personally, and also understand her context, her audience. And so she thought that was important. So that's why we called the course, called the case Developing a Voice. Because it wasn't just that she, emerged from the forehead of Zeus full blown knowing how to do this. She had to kind of build this capacity, which is a lot of what GVV is about. So that said, the first little sequence, and I'll just remind you, she's a senior VP for a large consumer products firm. She spent most of her career in that industry, but she's worked in different functions, sales and distribution, and now strategy. And earlier in her career, she worked as a consultant. And the first stories that she told me about were early in her career when she was still in her 20s. She faced several sexual harassment situations. Once when she was visiting a client at their site, the company rep told her to succumb to his advances or her firm would not get the assignment. So there was a quid pro quo kind of threat. Another time in an offsite team meeting, a senior partner and VP pressed his room key into her hand and said, come to my room. I need you to see me this evening. And the third time was when a senior manager in her own firm tried to pressure her to respond to his advances. And she learned later that he was doing similar kinds of things with other women in the firm, and women who were even more junior than she herself. So we'll pause there, because those are the kinds of situations she was having. And, in a GVV case, we would pause there and we would preface, we wouldn't say, what should she do? Should she act? We would preface it by saying, she knows this isn't right. What can she do? How can she be effective? So I'm curious to hear if you all had thoughts about this. I'm curious especially to hear if your thoughts are different than they may have been when we wrote this case, because we wrote it pre-Me Too. So does anyone want to share some of the thoughts that they had before I tell you how she handled these things? And I guess you can just, Bob said you can chat or put your comments into the questions, or you can just speak up or raise your hand.
If you want to speak, then use go to the reactions button at the bottom, and there you'll find several things. The bottom one is raise your hand. There's a higher one that looks like it's raising your hand, but it's just clapping. And of course, you should clap nonstop for Mary Gentile, but in terms of raising your hand, make sure you use that bottom thing, or just send a question. Write a question. A couple of people have asked questions already, but they had to do with reference materials and names or types of organizations that have been using GVV. So we'll leave that discussion for later.
Yeah, and I'll just say that people should feel free to email me afterward for anything we don't get to in the hour. Bob knows how to reach me.
Yeah. As I was looking at these, nobody's raised their hand. So I'll just say what I scribbled down for myself was that as I thought about them, I realized the degree to which having rehearsed something beforehand would be so helpful rather than being caught blindsided by this. And it occurred to me that people are used to doing that when they prepare for job interviews. They'll say, okay, what if you're asked what's your biggest weakness, or what would you do in this situation?
I work too hard.
So people prepare for challenges when it comes to job interviews. So why not have this as part of the portfolio of preparation? But
Yeah.
beyond that,
Go ahead.
But beyond that, I just then started thinking of, well, if somebody came to me when I was a manager and said, I'm having trouble over in this other area, what do you suggest I do? So I'm good at telling other people what to do. I'm not so good at doing it myself, but I would have thought about various sorts of things. The other thing that I then started writing down was what I would hope a company or an organization code would include, and one of the words I like is barter. because people tend to think that that things happen when money exchanges. Well, if you're offering money for sex, then you've gone to a prostitute, right? But these situations are not ones where people are offering money, rather they're offering influence or job protection or other sorts of things. They're not offering money. Therefore, it's barter. And and part of my hope would be that companies and organizations make clear that bartering for various sorts of favors is also just as forbidden as offering money or demanding money for various sorts of improper compensations or quid pro quos. In any case, that's all I had to offer.
Yeah, so, oh, go ahead, Craig.
Oh, sorry. I just want to loop back to something that Robert brought up, and it's that idea of preparation and maybe expectation. So as I read and I hear this again, as you relate it, I can't help but thinking about the context in which this is happening and how, going back to this idea of preparation, how that influences the potential ways of handling this. So if the impression from her perspective is that this is systemic and I'm up against a culture that I can't change, then that means that she's already silenced in some sense to being able to give voice to her values. On the other hand, if she feels like, that is not the case, that this is something that may be, something that occurs that was unanticipated because it's not a feature of the culture, or not a feature of the experience that she's had as she's moved through her career, that again changes the dynamic. And I think I agree with Robert that one of the ways that this might be explored is to seek counsel from somebody, a colleague, likely who may have already navigated these waters to some extent or have some advice. So I'm guessing this would be a female colleague rather than perhaps a male colleague. But this idea of expectation, you mentioned it earlier in your comments leading up to the case here, is this idea of, what on the vocal side, the person expressing their values, right, has one kind of part of the dialogue, but the other part of the dialogue belongs to the person who's hearing this vocalization, this communication. And if the person who is thinking about, giving voice to their values anticipates that the audience for their voice is not going to be a receptive one, will they then just not even bother? So I'm really curious, as you spoke about different experiences in different places, culturally, does that, really influence this? Sorry, I've got a bunch of stuff going on here in these comments. So
yeah, no, but you're absolutely right. Actually, it's true. And, Bob and you both mentioned this idea about having expectations and codes and guidelines. And is this an aberration or is this somehow accepted within the culture? And in my experience, what you see is organizations that do have codes tend to have, and most organizations do now, most of the research suggests that the vast majority of them do prohibit this kind of behavior. That doesn't mean that it's not going on in the culture. It doesn't mean that it's not tolerated sub rosa. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily even acted on when people call it out. And so what's interesting is to figure out how can you change that if you're in that kind of an organization. And Bob mentioned this idea of people rehearsing because they don't necessarily feel equipped to do something like this. That's basically all GVV is, right? And the idea is that often when people encounter a values conflict or an ethical issue or a situation like this, we dumb ourselves down, even if we may be very articulate, even if we may be good negotiators, even if we may be good debaters. When it comes to these kinds of values issues, often we silence ourselves and we don't act. It goes back to that research I was talking to you about, where people act emotionally and then rationalize after the fact. And that's why the rehearsal of GVV is so important. So you guys are really putting your fingers on a lot of the key issues. Let me share what she did and then talk about how this moves on. So let's see what she ended up doing. I was interviewing her. So this is kind of her words or my paraphrasing of her words. She says, I never gave in to any of these demands. So, the first thing is she didn't assume that she had to give in to this, or otherwise they were going to take away the deal, or she was going to get demoted or fired, whatever. But then she said, but I also absolutely did not speak clearly or with confidence. She said, I was rattled and uncertain. She was very young. I was young and junior in the firm, but I also did not experience, she said, but I also did not experience any negative repercussions for my refusals. The firm still got the assignment from the client who threatened to withhold it. In fact, he really wasn't in a position to make that kind of threat anyway. And the senior partner I rebuffed just acted as if it had never happened. And so she says, each time I successfully held my ground, and in her case, holding her ground was limited. It just simply meant saying no. It didn't mean reporting anything. She said, each time I successfully held my ground, I became more sure of myself. You live through a few of these kinds of things and you learn that you can survive. You learn to speak more calmly and confidently when they occur. Initially, however, I saw it as an individual challenge that I had to handle on my own. And this is also probably because this was, as I said, pre-Me Too and a bit before that. So I think organizations have evolved somewhat, but she was seeing this as something that this was just on her. And she said, but it wasn't until the third time, the time when she learned that other more junior women were being subjected to the same thing. She said, it wasn't until the third time when I saw that women more junior than myself were also being harassed that I raised the issue to anyone else in the firm. I figured, how can an organization act to stop this if they don't know that it's happening? I reported the incident to more senior executives in the firm. They asked me back a second time to gather more information. But in the end, however, nothing happened, either to him, the senior manager, or to me, she said to herself. So what's interesting, I'll share with you at the end if we have time, and if we don't, I can email it to you after and Bob can share it, the lessons she took from her experiences. But one of the lessons she took was to look at that as positive reinforcement. Now, many of us would look at that as negative reinforcement, right? They didn't fire the guy, but she felt that because they listened to her and because she wasn't punished for bringing this to light, she decided to see that as reinforcement that she should raise her voice. It wasn't positive reinforcement in the sense that this company is now doing the right thing, but it was positive reinforcement for her own development, which leads her to further experiences. And I'll give you the second one now. So the second one was,
sorry, hang
go
on a
ahead.
second, Mary. I just want to read out something that one person sent in. I think picking up from some of the things I said, it is a type of conflict of interest to barter for sex, as the individual with influence personally benefits. Conflict of interest should be part of the code of ethics and code of conduct.
Yes, and most codes of conduct do, in fact, talk extensively about conflicts of interest. So that's a good point. Absolutely. So let me move on here. So a number of years later, we're calling her Lisa, that's her name. A number of years later, Lisa recalled a 2-day offsite team meeting. And after a day of training, a group rode back together to the hotel in a bus. And when the van stopped at the entrance, one of the senior managers told all the women, 3 women, to get off and 2 of the men to get off, and said that the rest of them were going to go off to a strip bar. And she says it was an uncomfortable moment and became even more awkward when one of the men who was asked to get off said no, he wanted to come along. So she was sort of figuring out, now what do I do with this? This seems inappropriate, to her. And so she needed to think about what to do. I'm curious if people have thoughts about that, and then I'll tell you what she did do.
Anybody want to raise their hand or send something in the Q&A or the chat, which I'm monitoring? I find this really weird about the guys, the 2 extra guys. Anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing is disagreeable.
The whole thing is weird. Yeah. Well,
okay, here's one thing.
Okay.
It might depend on how high up the boss proposing this happens to be.
Very good point. So that actually leads me into what she did. So thank you, whoever said that. So at the time, Lisa Baxter, she said, at the time, she said, I said nothing. once again. But, but those are those moments where you're trying to figure out what the heck, but she said she considered what to do, and she decided to bring it up a few days later, offline and one-on-one with the most senior manager who had been on the van. Okay, so she could have gone to, but she went to the most senior guy who'd been on the van. She went to his office and she said, and this was my reporting, what she told me, this was an interview. She said, that experience about the strip bar just felt wrong to me. And she owned it. She said, it felt wrong to me. I've needed to bring it up with you because it still bothers me. I need to talk to you to try to understand why it happened and what you think about it. So there's a lot of interesting things in the way she put that. She owned it as her discomfort, but also that it was a need, a necessity, because it was staying with her, and that she needed to understand him, right? So she didn't accuse him right from the offset, but she did say it felt wrong to her. So she said, she's told me she was surprised by his response. And he said, I felt really uncomfortable about it ever since that night. I didn't know what to say or do then or since. I know now I made the wrong call, but I don't always see that in the moment. Some of this stuff is just kind of the way it's always been. I would be grateful if you'd help me stay focused on this kind of thing and remind me and tell me the truth. Now, some of you may recognize that this is something that women, people of color, anyone who's in something of a minority position demographically within an organization is often asked to be the conscience of the organization. It can be a very thankless role, right? But she decided to take him at his word. And she said, although not the response she expected, she decided to take him at his word. She gave him feedback on a number of occasions after that when she thought he had behaved inappropriately, unfairly, or with bias. Looking back, she said he took her advice sometimes, and other times he did not, though his track record was imperfect. So that was how she handled that. So she felt like, one of the things that's interesting with her is that she understands or believes that she may not always be successful, but she's acting and voicing because she feels like it is her responsibility. It is what works for her. And also because I think there's a piece of her that feels like that's how she does make change, that if she just stayed quiet, then she's really complicit. But that if she actually tries to raise it, even if it's not always successful, she has decided that that would be the way that she would respond. So we'll move to the next situation. So the person who raised the thing about the senior person in the room was on to something there. And she did target in her behavior. She didn't just paint the whole bus with the same brush. So as she progressed in her career, she found herself in a company of more and more senior executives. She was becoming a senior executive herself. And she recalls a period when the CEO decided to initiate a book club or a book discussion group. At one point, he assigned a tell-all book from a different industry, presumably because it might shed light on some universal organizational lessons. However, the book included a great deal of extremely explicit, rough sexual content, and Baxter felt uncomfortable with the thought of a group discussion with her fellow executives, only 3 of whom were women. So she asked her husband to read it to see if she wanted to test her reaction. Am I being, oversensitive here? And she said her husband was even more embarrassed than she was, or uncomfortable than she was. So she decided to approach the CEO one-on-one to tell him that she decided she would not want to participate in the group discussion of the book. So it's interesting. I'm going to move a little quickly here because I want to get through. So I'm not going to stop for a discussion there, but I would have stopped this right there where she was uncomfortable and her husband was even more uncomfortable and said, what should she do? But she decided she was going to go to the CEO. It was his book club and his book choice. And she was not going to accuse him, but she would tell him, I'm uncomfortable with this, so I'm not going to participate in that discussion of that book. And she says that she recalls that she did not pass judgment on the CEO or the book, but simply said, this doesn't work for me. She made no demands, and the CEO made no apologies. He did, however, decide not to use the book. And a year later, he told her that he respected her for raising that. And he added, I couldn't have done that if I were in your shoes. So she felt, again, another case where she decided to take that as positive reinforcement. both that he chose not to use the book at all, which was really, the ideal outcome from her point of view, but also that he recognized her for this. So it was interesting that she found a way to do that worked for her. So now I want to take you to the last scenario and see what you think she should do. This is the one I originally interviewed her about. I wasn't really trying to do a case around sexual harassment issues. So she said she faced a challenge to her business judgment that to her mind had repercussions for the well-being of the firm, excuse me, and its employees, as well as her sense of fair treatment. As a senior vice president for strategy, she concluded she needed to fire one of her senior reports. So he was a fairly senior person. Before taking this action, however, she had several conversations with her peers in other areas of the firm and was told that the chairman of the board, now remember, this is like a Fortune 200 firm, the chairman of the board had a particular interest in this individual and that she would likely hear from him. He wouldn't be pleased if she fired the gentleman. Baxter was confident, however, in the validity of her decision and did not think it was right to protect someone who could not perform his job at the expense of the firm and his peers. Predictably, as soon as she dismissed the individual, she received an irritated call from the chairman of the board who began to chastise her for her decision to pressure her to reverse it. So I'll pause there and ask, so what do you think? How could she raise her voice in this kind of situation? What do you think she should do? How could she do it? Any ideas?
The person who mentioned before about how senior should it go? Documentation. Document the individual's failings. I think this person's been around the block once or twice.
Yeah. And I'll be interested to share when I share what she actually did. There's some relevance to that. So that's great. Always good advice. Any other ideas about how she might respond? Because you can document and it can be, you have the reference, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful.
Given, I'll just jump in, waiting on others to join, but given the track record which you've now shared with us and which was shared in the extract ahead of this session, I mean, she has this almost kind of innate ability to kind of stand her ground, right? She's courageous in her, and confident in her manner, but she phrases it in such a way that she understands the audience to whom she is about to create a communication with. And that's really important. So I'm guessing that, given that she's going to stand her ground, she's not going to relent in her decision. She's made the decision. Obviously, she's done the due diligence. I'm going to assume, done the document. She's in that position for a reason. So it's not like it's simply, a spur of the moment kind of decision. She's going to, share that with the chairperson, right? And account for the reason why this is the decision that she's made and why she's in the position to make the decision that she is making. And that by explaining it and giving it the detail that is required, obviously, because the chairperson would not be privy to the information that she's privy to, there's probably some kind of resolution available, unless we're talking about somebody who is just not going to hear anything that she's saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, the point you make that the chairman may not be privy to the same information that she's privy to. And I think that would be one of the ways she might frame it to make it more palatable for him to hear. That's a good point. Anybody else?
One person has written this: bring it up with the chairman before relieving the person of their duties. In that conversation, explore respectfully why the chairman is influencing an HR decision.
Yeah, and the trick there would be to figure out how to do that respectfully. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I want to ask you something before you go into the solutions.
Mhm.
In your experience, in your wide experience now, what about the permutations where the executive doing the firing is a man versus a woman, where the fire-e is a man versus a woman, where the person trying to exercise influence is a man versus a woman. Um, that just occurred to me that this is a particular dynamic. Two men are friends of each other. One of the two men is not performing well, and a woman is daring to step in and interfere with Buddy's career. Right.
Right. So I have not researched that specifically or empirically, but certainly is something I've observed. I think that some of it has to do with just I think I mentioned earlier with the book group that the CEO's intention was to bond his team together. And some of that bonding just, because of the kinds of activities that the different genders tend to engage in, et cetera, some of that bonding just does tend to be male to male as opposed to male to female or female to male. And so in this kind of a situation, I think that is very much relevant to the situation. And when I share at the end what her lessons were from this, your observation is going to be quite relevant.
I'll toss in one other dimension here. Something that's been coming up in other contexts of activities that I'm involved in is to remind people of the phenomenon of unconscious bias and the startling degree to which people will say, no, I don't have any unconscious biases, which logically
that I'm conscious of.
Exactly. Logically, one should only say, I'm here to listen now, because obviously I cannot report to you my unconscious biases, right? But in this kind of case, what just occurred to me now is the sort of thing that one reads about after the Second World War, where women had been doing quote unquote men's jobs.
Rosie the Riveter.
and when the men came back, the organization would say, well, now we have to take this guy back in because of course he's the breadwinner, and you'll be depriving a family of revenue if you stay in this job.
Right.
Which to me would be a bias if it's still around now. And I would suspect there are people who still think that way, that women simply ought not to be occupying jobs or earning the same salary as men, because men have these greater responsibilities. That's still lingering in North America.
And the research is that women are not making the same salaries as men even now. So yeah, absolutely. Well, let me share what she did. Let's see. She waited. The chairman called her up, and he was angry. It was not a friendly inquiry. He was angry. Baxter waited until he paused, so she let him vent, and then she calmly asked, "May I have the opportunity to explain my thinking on this decision?" And then she proceeded, as someone said something similar to this earlier. She proceeded to enumerate the things the individual did very well. So she started with all the strengths that this guy that she had just fired had, all the things he did very well. And then she followed that with all the things that he didn't do well at all. And then she explained that in light of recent decisions about the firm's strategic priorities, both lists of abilities would be absolutely essential. So these recent decisions about priorities were things that the chairman of the board would have been engaged in and would have signed off on. And she was saying, we need both of these sets of skills, the ones that he has, but also the ones that he doesn't have, and that they would be critical to the firm's success. And so she concluded by asking the chairman if he saw things differently. And she recalled that the chairman, seeing both that Baxter knew and acknowledged the individual had a lot of these strengths, as well as his weaknesses, and also that she positioned the decision as an organizational necessity rather than an individual concern. He backed down and accepted her decision. So in other words, she didn't frame it as there's something deficient about this guy that you like so much. She framed it as he's really good at this, he's not so good at this, and we need both of these for the firm. So it was more about what the firm needs, so she was appealing to something entirely different in the chairman. One of the pillars of giving voice to values is purpose. And we talk about the idea that when you're trying to influence people, you want to think about a broader, higher level purpose that both of you share and appeal to that rather than trying to convince them to have a different priority than the one that they think they have. And so she did that. She acknowledged her strengths, the strengths of this individual. So the chairman didn't have to feel like he was an idiot for thinking this guy had something on the ball. She acknowledged she did. And she also talked about the decisions about the good of the firm that he had been committed to. And in retrospect, she reflects that the most important factor in this exchange, and I think this was really cool. She said the most important factor was that she did not assume that the chairman's call was a direct command. Although he wasn't used to having his opinion challenged, she was willing to ask sincerely, can we discuss this? And that question made all the difference. And I've heard that from a number of people in the work I've been doing. It was just that when someone more senior to you, seems to be requiring something, the people that I've worked with who are more effective at acting on their values and voicing their values effectively say they see it as sort of an opening gambit. They see it as the beginning of the conversation, and they respond respectfully. They don't like engage in a fight or an insult, but it's more that they see it as the platform for having the conversation. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I know that we're running short of time, so what I would like to do, unless somebody has something burning they want to say, is share with you. I asked her, after all these stories that she shared with me, I said, can you identify what you've learned from voicing your values and all these different experiences and doing it more and more assertively, doing it, more extensively. In the beginning, she simply acted on her values by not giving in to the harassment requests. But as time went on, she was more and more assertive. And she came up with 10 things, and I will go through them very quickly, but I have them written out, and I think I shared it with you, Bob, but if not, let me know and I'll send it so that they can be shared with people, because I thought they were pretty insightful. The first thing she said was experience, just that having lived through some of these, she became more able to deal with them, right? And we saw that with the harassment examples. The second one was positive reinforcement. But what was interesting about that is that she chose to look at things that some of us might not have seen as positive reinforcement as positive reinforcement. So in other words, the fact that even when they didn't act on her advice, the fact that they didn't punish her for disagreeing, she saw as, oh, well, they're reinforcing my voicing my values. And so she framed her experiences in a way that empowered her. Because there's always many ways to look at things. Why not choose a way that allows you to act more? The third one was mentors. And this was the idea that she specifically watched for senior peers who pushed back. And she looked at, well, how do they push back? How do they disagree with more senior people in the organization? What can I learn about strategies that work in this context and with these players? So she specifically did that. And then the next one is one somebody mentioned earlier, or maybe it was you, Bob, when you were talking about, someone was talking about this. She had a self-created support system. So what she did is she looked around to see when she started, when she got to the point where she was reporting to the CEO, there was only one other woman who was reporting to CEO. But as time went on, there were 3 or 4, and they started meeting monthly. Offline, and basically would share the experiences they were having and brainstorm together about effective strategies. They would both test their reactions to see if their peers saw the same thing they did, and then they would work together to think about what would be an effective strategy in this context with these individuals. So she created that proactively. Another one is as I mentioned earlier, she didn't assume opinions are orders. That was what we just saw with the CEO. She also said that form can be as important as substance. And she said the fact that she always tried to raise these issues very, very calmly. She usually tried to do it always one-on-one because she didn't want people to feel defensive or embarrassed. She would try and do it in a way where she acknowledged that they might have an opinion that or an insight that she didn't have, even when she's pretty sure they didn't. So she gave people a chance to respond without having to be humiliated or feel like I'm a jerk for having thought this. The next one was that, and this is a GVV pillar, to know yourself and to play to your strengths. She said that she had always been raised to follow authority, right? To respect authority. And that, you know, she acknowledged that that could be something that works for your good or for ill. You know, a lot of the worst things in our world have been done under the premise of I was just following orders. But she decided to use it more as a matter of form rather than substance. So it didn't mean that just because someone more senior to her told her to do something that she thought was wrong, that she had to do it. But it meant that the way she confronted it should be respectful, should acknowledge that they had a position of authority in the organization, should give them the chance and the option to be able to express their views as maybe having something legitimate behind them. So that was something that worked for her. Her strengths, her style was to respect authority, but she found a way to respect authority that didn't mean having to give in to things that she knew was wrong. Knowing and respecting your own limits, you know, and for her that meant, you know, obviously not giving in to behaviors that were, you know, wrong and abusive, but also knowing that, for example, I don't want to read and discuss this book with the other C-suite executives, even though it may have felt like a career limiting move to not engage in that opportunity. And then to frame choices in ways that align them with the broad, widely shared purpose. We already talked about that with this individual that she was firing, that she didn't bring it down to individual personalities. She talked about it in terms of the firm. And then the last one is very GVV, and it was practice. That, you know, the more you do this, the better you get at it, the more likely and comfortable you are in doing it. So those were her 10 lessons, which I thought were pretty good.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary. Yes, they are, and please do send them to me. I will distribute it to it. The number 9 corresponds to what one of the people said. Excellent refocus, organizational strategic choice versus personal choice. And we also had one question, and I hope that you can give us just a couple more minutes.
Sure.
It sounds like utilitarian logic works best in these cases. Are people in your experience more likely to respond negatively to more Kantian right versus wrong reasoning?
It's interesting. It's a great question. I actually would say, I think utilitarian logic helps with figuring out strategies for addressing the issues. But GVV is kind of at its heart based on something a little more Kantian, in the sense that I'm not saying, you know, a lot of times utilitarianism gets used, at least in business ethics classes and courses, as, you know, should you do this or not? In GVV, we've already decided I'm not going to participate in this behavior that I think is wrong. But I might think in a very consequentialist way about how I'm going to be most likely to be effective in refusing to do that, and in raising the issue, and in perhaps influencing others to share my viewpoint. So it's a little bit of both.
Well, thank you very, very much. I'm going to switch over to my last slide, and if I can find my way around here again.
Can I add one more thing?
Yep.
I just wanted to add that I know you had asked me to share how GVV is being used, and I forgot to mention, I think one of the coolest things we've been doing lately, and we've been doing this for the last couple of years now with KPMG, but we're actually expanding it to work with other organizations as well now, is that we've introduced GVV to them. And then we've decided, you know, when I work with companies, we don't use a scenario like the one we just worked through. We create scenarios that are custom to that organization. And what we've been doing now is at KPMG, we call it the GVV Master Facilitators Program, where we basically have a group of self-selected individuals, managers and partners, who want to practice using GVV, then we work with them for them to develop some GVV style, post-decision making scenarios that are relevant to their function, whether they're in audit or tax or consulting. And then we teach them how to teach them. And then they go out and teach within the organization. So we're creating an ongoing and growing cohort of individuals who are both more skillful at using GVV themselves, have reflected on how it applies to their function, and who are comfortable leading others in building that skill and that capacity. And so we've done this program twice so far now with KPMG. The goal is to make it a regular offering, maybe quarterly or something like that, so that you gradually are creating a greater and greater number of folks who can do this. And they will then be building these scenarios, not into a separate GVV course, but into their trainings around tax or around audit or around various consulting issues. And that's something that now we're replicating with other organizations. I just wanted to mention that because it's one of the pieces of the work that I'm most excited about right now.
Well, thank you very, very much. And I'm just going to now put up my last slide. I hope it's up there. While I ask people to use the question box to send us any comments or questions. And there were several requests to know more about law faculties and about police agencies and so forth that were using your thing. I've noted those questions, and I'll make sure that those individuals get the answers from Mary. But also I'll be asking you, Mary, for this for the list of 10 that we can distribute. So just allow me, please, to thank you very, very sincerely. Craig, if you want to add your thanks, please do that. And meanwhile, I'll just say to the people who are online, don't disconnect, because our AGM will begin within a few minutes. Okay. Thank you very, very much, Mary.
My pleasure.
Over to you, Craig, and then Mary, if you don't want to attend our AGM, it's okay.
I think I'll pass on that. I'm going to go to the hearings for the January 6th commission in the US. So it's starting right now. So I'm going to do that.
I see. But you think that's more entertaining. Well, I hope the outcomes are as good as the outcomes that we get with EPAC when you talk. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, good. All right. Hello, hello, Craig. I think that
Back.
we've been yes, you're back. Thank you. Um, and we we also expect Vanya back uh, unless she got called away for something.
Yeah, she
But
did. She notified me she's had to go to some work meeting, so she's not able to continue.
okay, so I'd say let's get started. There are let's see, there's four of us who are directors of EPAC and six other members who are attending now. So that's more than enough to have a quorum. And at this point, I think I'll just mute myself and you pull me back in if you need me for something. But it's over to you, Craig. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, everyone. I did experience some kind of technical issue. My system just shut down randomly without any warning, which is new. I haven't experienced that in quite some time, at least not due to a completely non-weather related concern. So it's a perfectly nice day as far as I can tell, but nonetheless, that occurred. So I apologize for the delay and for being absent for the final remarks in the wonderful webinar that we were all part of a few moments ago. So in the interest of time, let's begin our EPAC AGM 2022 general meeting. And I once again, welcome everybody. Thank you for being a part of this session. So I'll ask Brad, if you don't mind, confirmation of quorum of members in attendance. I think Robert might have mentioned that we are okay on that front, but just to confirm, that looks good.
So that we have 10 members and we have 45 members total, so that should make us quorum.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So the draft 2022 AGM agenda has been posted, and assuming that everybody's had an opportunity to take a look at it, or at least those of you who have had an opportunity to look at it, are there any amendments, changes, or adjustments to be made to the agenda? And if not, I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. So Robert moves that motion, and I don't see everybody, but I'll ask for a seconder.
Brad can second that.
Okay, thank you, Brad. So that motion has passed and is settled. So going on to item number 4, the adoption of the draft AGM minutes of our last AGM meeting, which was June 17th of 2021. Again, it has been made available on the website. If you have not taken a look at it, please feel free to do so. If you have, and there are any items missing or any items that need adjustment, please advise. And not hearing.
Let me just interrupt one thing, Craig. Some of our members raised their hands when you asked for approval of the minutes or the agenda, whatever it was. So I'll keep watching that and I'll tell you who has raised their hands. And thank you very much, Bill and Pat, for raising your hands the last time. And then I'll automatically lower your hands for you. So next time you raise your hand, I'll know it's a new time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, and that would, as I said, I'm not seeing everything on my screen presently, just kind of limited real estate here. So that helps a great deal. So coming back to the approval of the AGM minutes of June 17th, 2021, not hearing or seeing any adjustments to be made, just need a motion to formally approve those minutes. And Robert has raised his hand.
And Paul Osborne has seconded it.
All right, thank you. So that that matter has now been concluded. So that brings us to the chair's report. And for those of you who may not be aware, I am chair of the board, the president of EPAC for the current meeting. And I will give you the benefit of my report as I bring it up here. All right, so this report has also been posted, but I will walk us through it. So I'm pleased to present the following report on the activities of EPAC since our last AGM on June 17th, 2021, as already mentioned. So COVID-19 continues to be a presence and a challenging issue in the lives of people throughout the globe. During the first half of 2022, other matters of grave concern have emerged, which have further exacerbated economic, social, and political strife. And I'd like to point out that in a 2020 report published by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, it was noted that COVID-19 has revealed vulnerabilities. It has also surfaced extraordinary human resourcefulness and potential. This is a time for pragmatism and quick action, but is also a moment when more than ever we cannot abandon scientific evidence, nor can we operate without principles. So I think it's kind of a helpful statement, a helpful reminder. And I think it's important to, feel the presence of that statement in the world that we occupy at this current point in our history. We will need to continue to encourage and develop the application of human resourcefulness and principled actions to deal with the challenges that we have all an interest in resolving. One of the lessons evident from the COVID-19 experience is that we as global citizens are connected in ways that perhaps we have overlooked and possibly ignored. So understanding that challenges are more likely to be overcome, confronted together is at the heart of a extract from Richard Schell. Richard Schell is a professor of legal studies, business ethics, and management at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. And recently in an article, he pointed out that ethical quandaries are solved as a team sport in healthy workplace cultures. I believe this insight remains just as applicable if the word workplace is removed from the sentence. So ethical quandaries are solved as a team sport in healthy cultures. So promoting awareness and encouraging application of ethical principles, reflection on ethical practice, and ethical research and thinking on ethics and our place in ethics, as demonstrated in the webinar Mary Gentile kindly provided for us earlier today. These are all at the forefront of EPAC's activities, and we continue to be pleased and continue to be proud to provide our membership various channels through which to explore ethics and ethics-related practice. Membership is our primary source of revenue. EPAC receives no external funding. The number of members, it changes, rises and declines at various points. And that means that, from year to year, it's somewhat precarious as to, the extent to which we can continue to provide the activities and the services that we are providing and have been providing for a number of years. So we count on the membership to help preserve and ensure EPAC sustainability. And I'd like to just remind folks of some of the things that we've been involved in over the past year. So we have presented 3 webinars between the last AGM and this AGM. In Your Face, Ethics Issues in a Hiring Process, presented by Dr. Chris McDonald, the Ted Rogers Leadership Center, Toronto Metropolitan University. That was on December 15th, 2021. We then had Dr. Michael Baumtrog, Assistant Professor of Law and Business, again from Toronto Metropolitan University, on May 5th. We presented Their People, Prejudging a Promotion, another webinar with a panel discussion around this topic. And of course, today, Dr. Mary Gentile, Giving Voice to Values, the Lisa Baxter case study, was something that we're very proud to, again, along with the other webinars, to bring to you. And we're very fortunate to have these folks willing to be a part and continue to be friends and contributors to EPAC. We've also provided 6 bilingual bulletins, which have gone out over the past year. We have not yet reconvened, at least formally, EPAC Ethics Roundtable meetings. However, if there is sufficient interest expressed by members, we would certainly be interested in engaging with folks wherever you happen to be, Ottawa, Toronto, depending on how many members are available in those cities, or elsewhere, who would like to join and get together for discussions on ethics-related topics. And of course, that does not have to be limited to in-person kinds of situations, we can also convene something, again, based on interest on through a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, whatever the preferred format is. I would also like to acknowledge great appreciation of EPAC over the course of the year. Certainly those who participated and presented the webinars, those who provided comments, asked questions, generated discussion. Really important. This is why we have these webinar opportunities, is to get people involved, to get them engaged, and to learn from one another. And so I know I derive a lot of value from this, and I hope that the same can be said of all the members who take advantage of these. For our directors, thank you most sincerely from both myself and on behalf of all the membership for the time that you have devoted to keeping EPAC operating smoothly, and for your advice, analysis, and your direction. It's the demands on participation. Without that, we really wouldn't be able to continue the work that we do. So greatly appreciated and very thankful to each and every one of you for your participation. So again, as a reminder, our articles of continuance require the EPAC board to have at least 3 directors and no more than 12. We would like to have more representation on the board. We have room for more representation. So we continue to encourage members to put their names forward. And in a moment, we will receive some information about a couple of members who have indeed done that. And again, we are always happy to receive interest from folks who would like to serve as directors, or at least even if you just want to inquire about what that might look like, happy to engage in a conversation around that. So we are now entering our 29th year of providing and promoting ethics communication, facilitation, education. As I said a moment ago, our ability to continue is very much dependent on the members and the membership. So, please do continue supporting us as you have already done. Please share, the kinds of attributes and the kinds of values, I suppose, and the value that you yourself derive with your friends, colleagues, family members, in the hopes that perhaps they will also become interested in becoming members. So once again, thank you all for your continued participation, and stay safe and stay well. And that's my report for our 2022 AGM. So coming back to our agenda, I don't know that we need a motion to receive the report. Brad, I think perhaps we do. So I will seek that motion to at least receive the report as provided.
Yes, you do require that motion.
So I can make the motion to receive the report. I believe I can make that motion. And I just need a seconder to.
I can second that for you.
All right, thank you. And that brings us, speaking of Brad, that brings us to Brad's report at item number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For my report for this, for the 2022 AGM, I can report that we did file Industry Canada proper paperwork for the 2020-2021 annual report, and that was filed shortly after the last AGM. We will file any required notices with Industry Canada after the 2022 AGM is done, and we will be updating the list of directors. We did hold 11 duly constituted board meetings this year, including this particular meeting. So the current directors of the board and their terms are as follows. So expiring at this 2022 AGM, Sean Anderson, his term has expired and is not being renewed. Robert Zerny, his is expiring and he has confirmed renewal for 2 more years. Craig Irvine, that's a pretty important one, is expiring, but he has confirmed renewal for 2 more years. And myself was expiring this year, but I have confirmed renewal for 2 more years. In midterm and renewing for the 2023 AGM is Vania Karam and Paul Osborne. The current records show that the membership currently stands at 45, and that is my report for this year.
All right, thank you, Brad. Bring you back to the screen here. Okay, so we do need, as always, a motion to approve the report as presented, or the secretary's report. Robert has moved that motion and seconded by
Paul Osborne.
Paul. All right, thank you. So come back to our agenda. So unfortunately, our treasurer, Vanya Karam, has had
Oh,
to
she-
step away.
No, she's still connected.
Oh, okay, Vanya, if you are available, it is over to you for the treasurer's report and approval of the financial statements for 2020.
I think she may have stepped away. So Vanya, if you're there, then please interrupt. But in the meantime, Craig, if you can proceed with that, that would be better.
Sure. So Vanya's, as I mentioned a moment ago, may have had to step aside to,
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Vanya is not connected.
okay, she's not connected. All right. So I will just go ahead and proceed with the statement of financial position. This is the unaudited statement as at December 31st, 2021, which she has provided. And at that date, the assets stood at $5,674 and the liabilities also stood at $5,674. I just want to look at the year. I'm looking at liabilities. So sorry, I have that wrong. Again, one of the one of the downsides of not having the person who created the report present the report. So our surplus, sorry, at the end of 2021 sits at $5,674. So, and that is a slight decrease from 2020, which was at 5,780, but not a lot of difference. So I believe this is also available on the website for review. And I'm just going to look at the breakdown here for you. So our revenues in 2021, $4,380, our expenses, $3,622. So our surplus at the beginning of the year was $8,485, and at the end of the year was $9,243. So we had in 2020, 62 members that, as Brad has pointed out, has declined a little bit in the current period. Not a trend that we're hoping will continue. How many years can EPAC survive with current finances? This again is approximation, and the number that is attached to that approximation is about 1.5 years. So again, it just underscores the importance and the reliance that we have on the membership. And that means, of course, that without that ongoing kind of support, that we would not be able to proceed much longer into the future in the same way. So again, that report is on the website. That is what I have by way of sharing with you what I can from that report, not knowing all of the details. But I'm sure that if there are any questions, you can email them and I will share them with Vanya to provide a response. So just need a motion to approve the financial statements as reported for 2021.
I can move that, Craig, if you wish.
Okay, Brad, seconded by,
I have Paul Osborne here raising his hand.
okay, thank you, Paul. And that matter has been concluded. So I mentioned my report, the importance of having the membership, become more engaged. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is by putting forward an interest in becoming a director. So at item 8, we have indeed the election of directors. And I'm very, very happy and pleased to be able to let everyone know that we have 2 director candidates, Alicia Cameron and Ian Braun. Both bring extensive ethics related experience and knowledge. And I thank them again for their interest in standing for the position of director. I'd like to give each of you just a few minutes, maybe to if you don't mind, come onto the microphone to give us a brief kind of introduction, just for the members that that may not be aware of your background, perhaps. So I'll start with Alicia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Alicia Cameron, and I've been working in this particular area for over 4 years now, that I'm professional with over 10 years of experience. And my background is in human resources and also organizational behavior, but I've had a strong interest in ethics for, oh my gosh, started over 13 years ago. I actually come from the municipal sector, so that is kind of where I'm working. And with that, it brings up, excuse me, a lot of different kinds of situations, and it's a complex environment, which has allowed me to kind of get, a very interesting perspective in terms of trying to balance the needs of the organization broadly and keeping consistency, but with also some very specific situations, as each area is quite unique and different. And so in terms of, what, I'd be looking to, bring to EPAC is I have some experience with network development and webinars. And so that's kind of where my interest lies. But I do want to say that, for me, joining the board would be, I think, a wonderful experience. I think what EPAC does is really important and crucial in our area. And so being able to be a part of that was something that would be, fantastic and extremely fulfilling, and I would want to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Appreciate your introduction. And Ian, if you'd like to provide a few remarks about your background, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I got into the field through my whistleblowing experience. This was back in 2006 when I was at Transport Canada. And I became associated with other whistleblowers, such as Alan Cutler, who is also a member of EPAC. And I ultimately started studying this subject at Carleton University, School of Public Policy and Administration. And I should be defending my dissertation in mid-August. I'm really interested in ethics and voice, so today's webinar was very relevant to me. And how we steer organizations and individuals in those organizations to more ethical conduct, and how we can normalize the act of speaking up about wrongdoing so that it isn't something that is seen as exceptional. My past experience, I was also in the Navy for a while. I was an educator, and I've done some program evaluation. I'm just really interested in applying this experience to help others, and this is where I think this is one of the reasons that I'd really like to participate in EPAC's board.
All right, thank you. Thanks to both you and Alicia for your interest, of course, for your introduction, and based on that, yeah, go ahead, Robert.
I'd like to just mention, in connection with both Alicia and Ian, that I had some personal contact with both of them before. I met Alicia via an online lunch, informal lunch, where I was chatting with her and with a former director of EPAC, Meg Steele, who works in the same organization, and I believe that they've probably crossed paths a few times in connection with particular cases. So this all grew out of an informal lunch and some very, very interesting conversations. So I'm very confident that we'll enjoy interacting with Alicia. And Ian, I didn't know personally until we were putting together the program for the May 2018 all-day workshop on the looking back at the Tate report in the federal government, which had been issued in 1996. And there was one part of the program where we wanted to raise the topic of whistleblowing, and Ian was recommended to us by, I now don't remember whom, but it was probably one of the professors at Carleton that we were working with who knew of Ian's research. And so we had a really interesting time with Ian talking at that conference. And I've kept touch with Ian a little bit since then, including joining him and another person while he was collecting some views for his doctoral research. So I'm delighted that both Ian and Alicia are joining the board, and look forward to their contribution.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, I will go ahead and make a motion to approve both Alicia and Ian as EPAC directors for the upcoming term. I just need a seconder for that motion to approve Ian and Alicia. Oh, sorry, I'm just looking for.
Sorry, Craig, I can second that if you wish.
Okay, great. All right, well, welcome Alicia and Ian. We will provide more communication as we go along, but it's a pleasure to have you both as directors of EPAC, and I look forward to working with you over the upcoming term.
And I apologize, I was muted. I didn't realize it, and I was saying that Chris McDonald and Patrick Cummings and one other person had also raised their hands as seconders. So it's nice to have broad support for Ian and Alicia.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that, Robert.
All right, so that takes us to item number 9, questions and other business. So are there any questions that has not been covered? Any content that we have not covered? Questions about the content that we have covered, or questions about content we have not covered? Seeing nothing, no other business, no new items were added. So as we are at the end of the agenda, we are at the point of adjournment. So thanks to all of you who've remained online for this AGM. Again, the materials that have been mentioned in this meeting are posted on the website. We look forward to continuing to participate or have your participation engagement throughout the remainder of 2022 and into 2023. Look forward to more webinars along the lines of those that we mentioned, along the lines of what we experienced today, which I think is so valuable, and certainly something that we can all kind of benefit from as we go forward in our careers or in our lives. So stay safe, stay well, and once again, thank you for being with us on this first day of summer, June 21st, 2022.